I haven't yet made any holes for clamping things to the Pantorouter table, and that's because I'm still not sure what way to clamp on there. I've actually come up with quite a few solutions over the years. Here's some of them. This is the clamp I came up with for the original Pantorouter, and basically this goes through a hole in the table, and then this tightens down, and actually this Acme thread and this part here actually just cut out of a little C-clamp, out of a really cheap one. That works quite well. Then I came up with this thing, which is just a toggle drill press clamp, and that attaches to the metal Pantorouter. Main problem with this one is it doesn't have enough clamping force, because sometimes the stock can really get pushed aside if you slip with a router. Then I've used this welding clamp with my Pantorouter XL. The advantage of that one is it's relatively easy to get through a small hole in the table, and this allows me to clamp stuff very securely to the table. I bought this drill press clamp, and that one again screws to the table, although it needs several screw holes, and I've often had it slip like this a little bit. Plus it doesn't have enough reach this way, so I can't really get to the middle of the stock. Then there's a lever clamp like this, and that fits in a slot in the metal Pantorouter. And these work really well, although annoyingly when you move the clamp up, sometimes just with vibration it falls down on its own. And the other problem with them is you can't really put it on this way, and of course it requires a slotted table, although the way the bottom of these is shaped, you could put them in a relatively small hole in the table and then clamp stuff to the table like this. And the advantage of something like this over, for instance, something like this or like this, is that it applies the counter pressure right below where you apply the pressure above, so it doesn't have a tendency to warp the table like this one does, because as you push down here, it pulls up here and pushes down here, and that bends the table a little bit. Then Microjig sent me some of these dovetail clamps, and this is a very clever system. Goes into dovetails in a piece of plywood like this, and you can crank down on these pretty hard without breaking the dovetail in here, because that's integral, not like having some kind of T-track, which I always kind of feel there's a risk of the T-track just getting pulled out as you tighten one of these clamps. But if you ever end up with a situation where the stock that you're clamping has a cavity right above the dovetail, and then you tighten it down, it's relatively easy to bust the table, so I'm a bit wary of that. And I've also made this block, which helps to hold one of these clamps in place on my slot mortiser. So I can stick that in a relatively small hole in here, turn that around, put this block under, and now that holds the clamp in place. But the space underneath the Pantorouter table is not as suitable for that. And then there's this adjustable C-clamp, which I've adapted for using on my slot mortiser. It's quite an oddball clamp, and I bought it on sale when it was discontinued, so I can't really recommend that. So I'm now inclined to make something like this again, and I've got various candidates for screws that I could use for this. This is for edge clamping. I've never actually used it. I really don't use pipe clamps very much. This came off of a busted hand miter saw. This off of some kind of power tool. But I think I'll use this part, which is a busted bar clamp. And I know this doesn't have any other use at all. I've carefully whittled out this shape so that now this clamp fits nicely in there. So this dowel, along with the threaded rod, helps to keep this part aligned, and I can put this in the regular position, or if I need to, I can make it reach out a little bit further. This screw goes through this hole in the clamp, and that keeps it from falling out. I didn't want to drill holes in the table yet because those depend on how the fence goes on there. And so I went back to the computer and revised the design of the fence, and this is what I've got. And the hole pattern that goes with this is here. But first I'll make the fence, and I've already laid that out on this piece of plywood. And then I can use that exact same fence as a fence for cutting mortises. So that completes this Pantorouter build. I still want to put varnish on it, but I won't be painting it because I tried different combinations of green parts and not green parts in CAD, and it just ended up looking gaudy, and I certainly don't want to paint the whole thing.